Right, everybody. Welcome to one more exciting session. In this particular session, we'll discuss about Azure SQL Database. What is Azure SQL Database and how to create Azure SQL Database instance, and we'll explore a couple of options with that. All right. Now, first of all, what is Azure SQL Database? Now, if you want to create a database or a SQL Microsoft SQL Server database engine on Azure, okay, you have to use a service called as Azure SQL Database. Now, it is a kind of it is a relational database on Azure cloud. Now, before we discuss more about this database, first of all, let us understand what is a relational database. Now, let's say you're getting data for your company, your customers' data. Like you have the first name of the customer, last name of the customer, and age of the customer. Ideally, what we do is that we create a table because we have three elements in the table. We create three columns, and each customer there'll be one particular row, like first name, last name, and age. Now, with the help of relational database, not only entering the data, we can also put some constraints to that. Like in the column first name should not be less than three characters. That is one constraint, and it should not go beyond 50 characters. All right, and we can also define like age should be an integer character, not a string character. Then it only accepts integer as the input for that particular column. And we can also define a constant like age should not be like more than 100 or 110 or 80, 90, whatever you think is feasible. Then when you add those constraints, your table will accept data if they are falling under that constraints. And you can create this simple table by using syntax create table, and then we can define the constraints. Now that's a simple table. Now relational database is more than that. All right. Now let's say I have address of the customer. I don't want to put this in my main table. Then I can have a different table for the address. And you see there's an address ID here, address ID here. Okay. Now I'll have the addresses table separate. Okay. Or else let's say I'll have another table which is like orders. Okay. Now these tables have a relation. All these three tables have relation so that we can query the data easily. Now, one more advantage is that when we have these relational tables, we can combine these columns and create new tables as well. All right, that is one more advantage, and it is up to us how many tables that we can have based on our business, based on the data that is coming in. We can create this relational database. Now, if we see here, let me tell you the capability of this relational database. Now, let's say country is there in this address, okay, address table. Orders is there in this particular orders. Now, if we want to see how many orders are there for each country or each city, we can do that. Okay, that is the power of relational tables or relational database. Let's see few more use cases why we are having to use a relational database. Now, relational database are perfect for managing structured data. Okay, this is one of the main points that you have to remember. Relational databases manages structured data, and they have schema, they have constraints and relationships. Because of this, the data quality is very good, and relational databases includes very rich capabilities. On Azure, if we have to create a Azure SQL database, okay, Azure provides three kinds of deployments because one kind of deployment is not suitable for all the kinds of customers. So there are multiple types of deployments. One is a single and a fully managed isolated database. So you can just create Azure SQL database, which is fully managed by Azure. What do I mean by fully managed by Azure? That means all the underlying infrastructure like creating a server, etc., etc. Everything is taken care by Azure. Now, there's a second type of deployment which is called as Elastic Pool. Now, what is an elastic pool? Elastic pool is a collection of single databases with a shared set of resources. Okay. Now, let's say I have my database is not fully operational for 24 hours. I have only peak 2 hours in a day. Peak time is only 2 hours in a day. So now rest 22 hours, my database is not much functional, but I'm allocating the resources, right? So if you want to optimally use all the resources, we can create something called as elastic pool. So we will see in a bit what is an elastic pool. All right. And if you want to create a fully managed instance, like a kind of on premises SQL server. So even when we say the first option, Azure SQL database, it is not exactly like how it is in on your on premises. There are some capability changes. But if you want to create a SQL server which is exactly same like how it is on premises, then we can use something called as managed instances. It is a fully managed instance of SQL Server. Okay, these are the three types of deployments that we have to work with SQL database on Azure. Now, whenever we create a SQL database, the first and foremost thing that we have to create is something is called as a server. Now, what is a server? Now, the database server acts as a central administrative point for multiple single or pooled databases. Now, if I create one server, I can manage the firewalls, auditing rules, threat detection, policies, failure groups for all the database that we have. So one server is mandatory. First time when you're using Azure SQL database service, first you need to create a server. And the same server you can use it for multiple database to manage all the rules like firewalls, auditing, threat, policies, and failouts. That is what a SQL database server is that. So when we're doing hands-on, we will create one server and we'll create a database. Now we understood that SQL Server database is a managed, right? So managed by Azure. That means the compute power, everything is managed by the Azure. Then how will I come to know what is the capacity of the SQL database that you require? So there are two types how you can purchase a SQL database. One is by DTU. DTU stands for Database Transaction Units. And second one is called as a vCore. vCore means virtual core. Okay. And there is one more type which is called as serverless. So you don't need to reserve any compute capacity. Whenever there is query only, the system will automatically allocate the compute. Now let us understand what is DTU. So DTU is basically database transaction units. So now this is a now what is a database transaction unit? This is a bundle of compute, storage, and IO. So if I select one DTU, that means I'll get little compute, little storage, and little IO resources. If I select two, little more. So based if as and when we select the DTUs, we'll get all the three resources which are compute, storage, and IO. Okay. Now this is best for customers who want some pre-configured resources. That means I want some fixed capacity. Okay. Now the second model is called as a vCore model. What is a vCore model of purchasing? Now this is independently scaling of compute, storing, and IO resources. Best for customers who value flexibility, control, and transparency. So here in DDU, all the three resources are combined. If I give one DDU, I'll get all the three resources. But as for a vCore, you can independently choose how much compute you want, how much storage you want, how much IO resources you want. That is what DTU and vCore capacity is. Now, there is one more important term that we have discussed and we need to know little more about is elastic pool. Now, what is a elastic pool? Now, let's say I have created a database with 20 DTUs. Okay. In this 20 DTUs, if you see from morning in a 24 hours, you see there are a lot for first 1 hour, I didn't use it at all. There's only one peak hour If you see the first hour, we did not use this at all. Okay, second hour, only little compute capacity used. Again, there is free here. Okay, so now the pool is completely not utilized. It is like, but we are still paying for that. Now, when we take a DTU, that means we reserved it. Now, let's say this is one server. Let's say another, when I say server, this is one database that we created, and let's say another database. So this database is also not fully utilizing the, so this database is also not fully utilizing the resources. Okay. But now if we create an elastic pool, so now if you see both the databases, they are being able to uh, utilize the resources because I'm using 30 DTUs here. Now if you see the first one I'm using 20 DTUs. Okay. Okay, the first one I'm using 20 DTUs. Sorry, this is 20 DTUs, and the second one is 20 DTUs. Totally 40 database transaction unit we purchased, but most of them are idle. But if you see, if I use the elastic pool, what I can do is that I can create only 30 DTUs, and I can make my database 1, database 2, share the elastic pool so that whenever they require resources, they take from this particular pool. So that I will be only charged for this 30 data DTUs, but still I'm getting the required capacity if I use something called as elastic pool. All right, that is what a elastic pool is. Now, what about serverless? Serverless is basically whenever you require a server or whenever you require to run a query, I can run the query. And if I'm not running any query, you see it is automatically turned off. I'm not being charged anything for that. So if I just choose a basic vCodes, that is more than enough. Okay. Serverless is basically whenever we need some process to run some query, Azure will automatically allocate the compute, and then the query will run, and I'll be only charged for that particular time whenever the query is ran. All right. That is what a serverless is. Now, a couple of more important features about Azure SQL Database is that it has automatic backups. What is the meaning of automatic backups? Now, let's say on everyday basis, I want the database to take a backup so that whenever I want to restore, I can restore it. So it is done automatically. There is no need of any manual intervention. And there is point in time restores. Whichever point in time, if I want to go back and restore a database, I can do that. And there is one more beautiful feature, which is like active geo replication. That means your database can be replicated to multiple geolocations, and we can also configure failover and zone redundant databases to make sure our database is highly available. Okay, these are some of the features of Azure SQL Database. Now let us go ahead and see some demonstration how to create Azure SQL Database, how to explore data, how to set up firewall rules. We will see a couple of hands-on exercises. Let me move to my Azure console for that. Okay, now I'm there on my Azure console. Okay, to work with Azure SQL databases, go to search, just type in SQL database. Okay, the first service which is coming here, SQL database, just click on that. Okay, once you click on that, there's an option here called as create a SQL database. Okay, go to create a SQL database and choose the subscription which is appropriate. In my case, it is Visual Studio is the subscription, and choose the resource group that you want to create with. All right, now you have to give a name for the database. I will say the database name as demo for level up. Okay, and you see I already have a server, but as we discussed, I told you that when you're creating for the first time, you have to create a server, right? So this is where I can go and create a server. Select this option. Let me give it server name as demo for EP, some random name, And what is the authentication? I'm choosing SQL authentication. SQL, so to log into that particular server, we need a username and password, right? We need to mention that. Okay, I'm giving username and password here. Click on OK. Okay, now you can also choose whether this workload is for development or production. I will say this workload is for development. And you see here the database that is configured. Okay, what is that configuration? Compute plus this thing. It is a vcode based. You see, one vcode, 132 GB. This is a zone redundant disable. If I want to increase the configuration or decrease the configuration, you see this is serverless again. I can choose this configure database. So once you go here, as I told you, there is provision. Okay. Now in the provision, computer resources are pre-allocated build per based on vcode. If I want to go to serverless, I can go to serverless. Okay, now here we can say how many V codes that we require, max V codes, how many minimum V codes. Okay, and do you want to auto pause enable? If your database is not running, you can auto pause for number of days. Sorry, if you want to pause this for on weekends when there is no load, you can go ahead and pause that so that you'll get your bill less. And if you want to make your database zone redundant, you can either choose yes or no so that the redundancy will be applicable. So for this now, if I choose this, I'm going to get this cost of this much per month. Okay. Now if I go to provision, you see it is coming 16,000 because it is taking 128 VPUs and 6 to 625 GB. I can go ahead and change the configuration as well. But as of now, let me go as serverless because that's more than enough for our hands-on exercise. I'm going and then backup redundancy. You want local, zone, or geo redundant? I will choose local. That is more than enough for us. All right. Now I have given all the required details. Now, if you want to make this database secured by giving a private endpoint, you can go into networking and then give a private endpoint. And the security, if you want to configure Microsoft Defender to enable security, we can enable it here. And additional settings, if you want to use an existing backup, as of now I don't want to use any backup. Okay, and the database collision, we can use the SQL Latin general collision. If you want to use any other collision, you can select this option. All right, and yeah, all right, those are the configuration details that I have configured. And review and create, select option create. The deployment is in progress now. This will take another moment for the deployment to finish. Now, if we see this, the database is created, select this option, go to resource. Now, if you see the database is created, now there are a lot of options here. Okay, now let's go to overview. In the overview, you can see the resource group, what is the status of this. Okay, connection strings. If you click here, it will show the database connection strings here. If you want to connect to a database applications or a JDBC URL or a ODBC URL, a PHP or Go, you can see all these connection strings over here. Now you also have other options here. Let's say the first one is on the top firewall. Okay. If you want to connect to this particular database from this from my local laptop or from any other Azure resource, right? We have to select the network first. Okay. Now if I want other Azure resources to access this, you can select this. Or if I want to add a client IP address to access this, I can add my client IP address. This is my laptop IP address automatically detected. Select option save. So this is, we are adding a rule to the firewall so that we can access this particular database. Now if I go to overview again, okay, you see the admin name is this. Okay, this is the name that I have created for admin. And if you want to reset the password, you can go ahead and reset the password here. Okay. And if you want to move this to a different resource group, you come to move here, move this database to a different resource group also. Okay. Or if you want to move to a different subscription, you can move it. Now, if you see here under SQL databases, okay, you will have a database which is created. Select this option database. Okay, now you'll have a server name here. Now you can also connect to the query editor here. Okay, now let me copy this. Let me connect here first, and I'll connect to the management studio as well. So as and when we go here, it is asking for a password. Okay, I'm connecting to the query editor here itself. I can see whether there are tables or not. Okay, there are nothing is here. Database is there, no tables at all. Now I can also connect to my developing environment or an IDE, which is like SSMS. Okay, let me go there. Type in SSMS SQL Server Management Studio. Okay. Now I copied my server name, right? So I can come here, view the server name. Let's say connect. The server name is this is my server name. Okay, and my login name is Satish, and I'll give my password and select option connect. Now I'm connecting to that Azure SQL database from my SSMS. Now here I can write all the queries that I want. Let's say a new query. Let me write a simple query here. Let's say create table by name persons. Let's have first name. It should be worker 255. All right. And then we can give constraints also, like the length should be uh, greater than 3, or whatever constant that you want, you can define the constants. I'm giving last name, where car, again 255. Let me give one more column. Column is like age. Okay, it should be integer. All right. Let me run this simple query. Now, in which database I want to run this? I want to run this in a database by name demo for level up. Let me change that. Okay, now execute this query. You see, command ran successfully. Now let me insert some values in this. Let's say insert into persons, name of the column. Let me give as values. I'll give the values here. Let's say okay, I'm entering the values. that I wanted, and let me run this and execute. I am able to run this query also successfully. Now let me run a select statement. Select star from the table name. Okay. Let me also run this. You should be able to see this line. Okay. We inserted one row, right? We are able to see that particular one row. Okay. That is how you can write the queries by using SSMS. Now let us see. If we refresh, let's see whether this table is visible in this query editor or not. We created that table using SSMS, right? It should ideally, this should also be visible in the query editor. Let me log in again. Click OK. Now let me expand these tables here. You see, I'm able to see the table that we created, and let us run this query here, and let's see. Yeah, you see the same output is written. Okay. That is how you can create databases, create servers, run the queries on the SQL database. Now let us explore a couple of more options here. Now let's see. Let me go here, SQL database. Now if you see here, there are a lot of other options here now. Let's say compute and storage. If you want to change the compute tier, if you want to increase the hardware configuration, you can come to compute and storage and do the necessary changes for your database if required. Okay. Now there is something called as logs. Now if you don't want others to do any changes, or you want them to only read but not uh, delete. Okay. If you apply a log, then people will only do a read only. They'll not be able to delete. Okay. Now you can have replicas. You can create a replica of this database to make sure if you want to restore that at any point of time, you can restore that. Okay. Not only for restoration, your replica can also serve as a read-only copy for your database. Okay. So that what happens if you have four replicas, you can manage your traffic on this particular replicas. But understand, replicas will only be a read only. Okay. Geo replicas for your databases reside on different logical server from the primary protect against regional failures or prolonged data center outages. Okay. Now we also have something called as sync group to which other databases you want to sync up with. Okay. Now this is a new feature which has come, Azure Synapse link. So if you use this Azure Synapse link, okay, now if your database is there, if you want to query this database for Azure from Azure Synapse, you can do that if you enable this link called as Azure Synapse link. Now to enable the Azure Synapse link, select this enable Azure Synapse link, select option subscription which is active, and the resource group that I have is demo. Okay, and the workspace that I have is, this is the workspace. Okay, and there are some prerequisites to enable this Synapse link on SQL database. Okay, all you need to do is that select option configure prerequisites. Select option continue. It is configuring the prerequisites now. Okay, now as soon as the prerequisites are configured, it is saying enable link. Let me choose the option enable link. You see here it is as it has took me to Azure Synapse link. Let me create a link service here. What is a link service? We will look into the upcoming chapters. But as of now, let me create a link service for this. I will leave everything for defaults. I'll give username and password. Select option create. Now it is successfully created. You see, it is showing our database also. But here it requires a primary key. We did not configure anything as a primary key, but that's okay. We can select that and click on continue. Target pool. So now on Synapse, there are a couple of pools like dedicated pools, all that stuff. Let me create a basic pool here. What is this pool? We'll come to know once we come to Synapse. But as of now, I'm creating a pool. I'm leaving it there. Select option continue. Click OK. Now it is created. Now you see my table. Now I can see from Azure Synapse. Now what is an Azure Synapse? Azure Synapse is a data warehouse. Okay. Now whatever data that I have in my database, which is SQL database, I can access from the data warehouse just by creating a link service and enabling this option called as Synapse link. Okay, we will learn more about Synapse links when we come to Azure Synapse. But that is, if you have to enable a Synapse link, this is how you need to do, and this is fairly very new feature. All right, and if you want to, if you already create one link, if you want to use the link which is existing, we can select option from here. And if you want to connect this database to Stream Analytics, which is also in preview, we can connect. But we'll understand how to work with Stream Analytics once we come to Stream Analytics. And if you want to connect your Azure SQL database to a Power BI to generate some reports on Power BI, you can go here to platform and then select option get started with Power BI, and you can connect your Power BI so that you can visualize your data in the form of reports there. And in the monitoring, if you want to create alerts, you can go ahead and create that. Anyways, we will look into alerts in the session called as monitoring, how to configure alerts. And if you want to see the performance, you can choose any one of the options to choose the performance here. All right, and there are a lot of other options. These are some of the options that you regularly use a part of Azure SQL database. All right. So what we have done in this chapter is that we understood what is Azure SQL Database, how to create a SQL database and connect to a management studio where you can develop your SQL code and query your databases for data analysis. That's all in this chapter, guys. I'll see you guys in the next class. Guys, have a good time. Take care.